What's up, everybody? Welcome to Discourse and Chill. I'm Ian.
And I'm your girl Reese.
Today, we are going to talk about the pivot. It's one of the most popular and trendy phrases going around right now, and essentially, it's become more and more important and popular because of the pandemic. A lot of businesses, a lot of individuals had to pivot during this time, and so we're just going to talk about ways to pivot effectively and coping with the change and still trying to or exceeding expectations and live those goals that you have set for yourself. So what exactly is pivoting? So to pivot means to fundamentally change directions, whether that be with your career, business, living situation, love life, when you realize that the current trajectory no longer aligns with your goals. The main goal of the pivot is to help a company or a person improve and or survive a moment. So it's been one of those things where a lot of companies had to pivot during this time, a lot of people had to pivot during this time, and a lot of people benefited. And a lot of people were unable to pivot, and they were unable to make it through the pandemic. So, Reese, have you ever had to pivot in your life?
Yes, I have had to pivot in life.
Mm-hmm.
No really, no really major pivots. I didn't have to do any pivoting during the pandemic. I think I discussed that in season one. I think the biggest pivot for me though was a change in living situation a few years back. Kind of threw me like for a loop, if you would.
Mm-hmm.
um, was necessarily um as prepared as I thought I was
Okay.
to change where I was living. So I ended up moving back to my mom's house,
Okay.
and that was a change within itself. But other than that, like no major pivots that have been like life shattering or like earthquaking for me
Mm-hmm.
personally. I
Yeah.
know other people have close to me, and people that's my circle adjacent have had to pivot some in life, but I haven't had any major pivots at all.
Mhm.
um what about you? I know we've discussed over the course of this podcast that things have happened with you.
Mm.
Any major ones, or you want to talk about some of those pivots?
Yeah, absolutely. I lost my job during the pandemic, and it was in an industry that is changing a lot, and finding a new position in the moment was very, very difficult. So I had to basically do some self evaluations, look at the things that I was extremely good at, the things that I did in my previous role, and figure out how to then apply those things to a new position. Like I knew I had to get into a new career, a new line of work, and I had to start from
Yeah.
the bottom. So it was a matter of just self evaluation and looking at the things or the skills that I had and how I was going to apply it to a new position. And also, I had to move. I was in California, and I had to make a decision of like continue to eat through my savings while I was unemployed, or move back in with my dad, or move in with my dad because I haven't lived with him for uh, 20 years now. But
Yeah.
it was one of those things where that was one of those things I didn't have a choice. It was this. Well, I did have a choice, but it was a no brainer, I would say, because of what was going
Yeah.
on. Like I needed to do that for myself and to not be in like financial ruin for the rest of my life trying to survive in an extremely expensive place. So I pivoted a lot in my life, but I think those are the most recent pivots that I had to encounter.
Right.
How do you pivot when it's time? Like what are the things that you do when you're like, all right, I need to change, or I need to I need to pivot.
So the first thing that I do for myself is I have to be honest. I need to
Mm-hmm.
like evaluate my actual situation
Mm-hmm.
and look at the facts in the situation versus my actual feelings. Most
Mm-hmm.
time when we end up having to pivot, we're like, "Oh my God, woe is me! I can't believe this is going on." But I had to like really like sit down and be like, "All right, this is happening. So this is the
Mm-hmm.
fact of the matter. Now it's time to actually move."
Yeah.
So I have to be accepting of this turn that I'm about to take, and just be more just open and willing to go through it, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think I do a lot of those same things. I lay out the facts and I accept that everything is about to change.
Mhm.
And regardless of how I feel about it, it needs to happen for my well being and for like my goals. Like I don't want to sacrifice my
Yeah.
goals for my current situation. So I think it's super important that you are able to identify the change and make it. And it's
Yeah.
important to try to make it quickly or as quick as possible
Mhm.
because you don't want to waste time and put yourself in a worse situation. And if you're a company or business owner or entrepreneur, like it's very similar. Like you want to identify, okay, I'm not making any money right now, so I either need to close this business and get a job, or I need to pivot this current business model that I have so I can leverage the things that I am extremely good at and focus on those things. So I think those
Yeah.
are great tips and great ways to pivot. So I found 5 effective ways to pivot. And so number one is be prepared, which
Mhm.
I think is very difficult. Like you don't
Yeah.
always see the thing coming,
Right.
whatever it may be. Nobody saw the pandemic coming, and so it's a good example of being prepared is hard sometimes because you don't know what's going to happen in your life that is going to catch you by surprise. Um,
Yeah.
I think it's important to focus on your strengths, be
Mhm.
relentlessly optimistic during the time, and make decisions quickly, and always be hungry, determined, resilient, no matter the outcome. So I think those are good ways to like effectively pivot. What are your thoughts on those?
I agree. The preparation for a pivot, I mean, it sounds good in theory,
Mm-hmm.
but when life hits you and you have to make a change, it's not like,
Yeah,
okay, well, on Monday, this is going to happen. And I know to
yeah,
be ready on Tuesday. It never works that way. So,
yeah.
being prepared, I think, is almost like a fantasy. It's one of those things like, okay, this is going to happen to me, so I'm ready at any moment, because you
Mm-hmm.
never know what this is.
Yeah.
So I definitely believe that once you hit that pivot, you realize like this is what's going on, this is the change I have to take to definitely
Mm-hmm.
focus on your strong points. I'm
Mm-hmm.
real big on knowing like, okay, this is what I can do right now. This
Yeah.
is where I thrive to help get me to the next whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I agree, you have to make that decision quickly, because as things happen, you don't want to again find yourself stuck there focusing on your feelings versus the actual facts of this is what's going on, and let me jump
Mm-hmm.
into action. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think the one that speaks to me the most is being relentlessly optimistic.
Mm,
Um, that is something that I had to remind myself constantly in like the job search and the transition and the move. Like
mm,
it's very easy to find ways to be down on yourself or to
yeah.
believe or to think that um, whatever change that you're making is not going to be in your best interest. And so it's important to just believe in yourself and continue to be relentlessly optimistic in those moments because you brought yourself to this point and there's no reason to say that you can't bring yourself to the next point.
Yeah.
And I think that's just something that I try to live by. I'm always optimistic even in situations I probably shouldn't be. And but I think it's something that has brought me to where I am now. Like I never stop believing in whatever I set my mind to or my heart to. Like I just know that I'm going to accomplish whatever those things are.
Yeah.
What do you learn? I guess are there things that you've learned about yourself when you've had to pivot?
The main thing I've learned, or not necessarily learned, but pretty much like kind of reinforced is, at the end of the day, I got me.
Mm-hmm.
I can't rely on other people, when it comes
Mm-hmm.
down to how things work for me and
Mm-hmm.
or, um, like my overall well being. I got
Yeah.
me,
Mm-hmm.
and it sucks in that regard, because then it further keeps adding to these layers. This barbed wire fence, like that people really don't always have my best interest in mind,
Mm-hmm.
and that I have to have me at all times. I also learned that I can always go to my mama. I got me, and my mama got me. But yeah, I mean, it's a hard lesson of at the end of the day, I got me, and I can't really
Mhm.
rely on other people. Has been the hardest thing to have to learn during pivots for myself.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, those are those hard lessons do come at, like, an emotional toll.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, like it's a lesson to suck to have to learn. But yeah, I feel like in each situation where I've had to pivot, um, I've had to know that, okay, like at the end of the day, it's me, and yeah, it's me. You know, have you had any hard lessons that you've learned, or any good lessons that you've learned while pivoting?
I think so. When I see the be prepared, um, it's something that I've always. I think you can only be so prepared, and I think those are the
Yeah.
lessons. That's a lesson that is very hard for me to see, but I could
Hmm.
see how it's important to do that because you may not be able to prepare for the change that is being made, but you may be able to prepare emotionally for how you're going to accept the change, or financially for how it's going to impact your pockets. So make sure you
Mm.
are putting a bag away.
Yeah.
And I think those are things that I've learned that there was a couple times I had to pivot, and I had a bag, and I was like, all right, I'm good. And the pivot took longer than expected. And I think each time, each time that I've saved money for a pivot, I think, or
Hmm.
saved money, like just emergency fund, the
Yeah.
amount in my head has grown every
Yeah.
time. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
well, I know this number ain't gonna work because last time this happened, that ain't work, so I need to get it to this
It didn't
number.
work. Right.
And then the next time it's like, well, I know that number ain't gonna work, so I need to like get it to this number.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something that I've learned, that I think emotionally and mentally, I'm always prepared for a change. Like I know that change is gonna come.
Hmm.
And I do a really good job of accepting things. And so
Okay.
I'm able to accept something, put my foot in the ground, and move, rather than like standing in it trying to figure it out. But I think financially, I want to get better at uh, just saving more, so I'm prepared for even more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. I don't think anybody can ever be financially prepared. Because there's always a situation where, like, okay, well, if I had this extra amount here, if I just had this much more, then it may
Mm-hmm.
have been easier.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so definitely, saving is good. I try to put away as much money as I can, and make
Yeah.
sure that I'm securing funds and or having access to, like, the multiple streams. So if, like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't have it here, I can pull it from here.
Mm-hmm.
So that is definitely a good thing to do, to try to be prepared. But I don't know if we could ever financially fully be prepared for a life change that's unexpected.
Yeah. Yeah. In the way that I think you can, but I guess also it all depends on the thing. Like whatever it
Yeah.
is, it really depends. Like I think in this last moment, I was trying to accomplish other goals, like pay off debt. And so I'm
Yeah.
thinking that like I'm gonna have this, and then when I didn't have that income anymore, I was like, oh
Yeah.
snap, I didn't save enough. Like no snap, because you were trying to pay off bills
Right.
from the
Right.
last time that you had to pivot.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so there was a timing that was also that made the pivot that much more difficult,
Hmm.
because I was doing the right thing, but not necessarily have enough time to really get to the place where I wanted to be. And those are the
Right.
times where you have to suck it up and reach out for
Yeah.
help. And I had to reach out to my dad and be like, hey, so this is what happened. This is what I need. You got me? And he was like, yeah, I got you. So I definitely appreciate that. And
Yeah.
then it's good to be here. I think I've been able to give back a little bit and help around here and help him out
Hmm.
as well. So,
Yeah.
it's mutually beneficial.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
That's definitely good. But I mean, it's also good that he was there.
Hmm.
That made the pivot a little softer,
Yeah.
or
Exactly.
possibly a little easier. To try
Hmm.
to get you had somewhere to land, so that's
Yeah.
always a plus.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So how do you cope? What are some ways to, I guess, cope with change?
First you need to be intentional. Take the time
Hmm.
out to ask yourself, what do I need?
Hmm.
And how can I contribute to shaping the future of what it is that I need? I
Hmm.
think being open and honest in that regard and asking the tough questions is the first thing to dealing with coping, because you
Hmm.
can't cope with what you don't know. So if you don't really
Yeah.
know what it is that you need, how are you fixing or dealing with the actual situation?
Hmm.
So definitely ask yourself, like, what do I need in this moment? What do I need, and how can I truly be a contributing factor to shaping what I need for the future?
Yeah.
Is probably the biggest thing, I think, in trying to begin the coping aspect of a pivot.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think
Yeah.
that's something that I'm learning to really ask myself what I need, because I think
Mhm.
my entire life I've been, all right, I have to pivot and move, and I haven't sat in a space and asked for help or asked for an outlet, and then
Mm.
things become overwhelming, and then I'm like, Reese, I just need to talk.
Yeah. I'm
I
like, come
need to
on,
vent
look,
in this moment. I need to vent.
right.
Yeah, and it's important to identify the things that you need and set new goals. And I wrote
Yeah.
out a new 5-year plan and journaled and did all kinds of things to really like refocus my mind on my goals, because I had to remember, like, I don't want to sacrifice my goals just because I have to pivot, or sacrifice my goals because I don't take the time to cope with the pivot.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like once you ask yourself, what it is that you need, then you need to actually, bring your voice forward, and not only let it be known to yourself, but let it be known to people around you. Listen, this
Mm-hmm.
is what I'm going through. This is where I am right now.
Mm-hmm.
And to kind of like, let that kind of shape, how you're going, or your opinion of moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's truly, truly, truly necessary to definitely speak and communicate those needs, and just let the people around you know this is what it was, but this is what it is now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So definitely be vocal about it is huge once you figured out what the it is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think for me, I always want accountability people in my life. So I want to
Mm-hmm.
make sure I communicate those. Like, if I change a goal, I'm going to reach out to you like, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. I
Mm-hmm.
need you to make sure that I'm on this path, or I'm doing the things that I'm saying I'm going to do. I tell my mom, I tell my dad, and I just tell people who inherently have my best interests at heart and want me to like accomplish those things. So I definitely make sure that I communicate new goals, or new ways to align with my goals with people, so to make sure I stay on
Yeah.
track.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
important. Um, So once you do that, like, have you ever had to like figure out um different like avenues or methods of accomplishing things? Have you had to like change completely, or
Mm-hmm.
were you able to like kind of still do some of the same stuff, just in focus in a different direction?
Yeah, I think you have to be able to find where you fall short, and I think we spoke about this in season one. Is I'm somebody who always has a lot of creative projects, and in 2020 I
Mm-hmm.
had none. So I didn't
Mm-hmm.
have the same outlets that I had that I'm sure influenced how I interacted with people, or how I performed at work, or a lot of things.
Yeah.
And so I think in this latest pivot, I identified that and was like, hey, I have to do this differently. And then you and I had the conversation about this podcast, and it took off from there,
Mm-hmm.
because it was a place that we both missed, and both wanted to build on things that we have done in the past. And so, yeah, I definitely think you should identify and experiment and try new things, because I think this has definitely helped my mental health and me being able to cope with being in a place that I don't necessarily want to be in. And, I
Yeah.
think those things are very important and impactful in the long run.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with all that, especially with the whole experimenting aspect of trying to figure out those new ways.
Mm-hmm.
But in that, you have to make sure that you are prioritizing what matters most. Like like okay, oh, I can do this, and this. But
Mm-hmm.
we have to always figure out what's that number one goal and make sure like
Mm-hmm.
the thing that's the most important is at the top of the list.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when we're experimenting with new ways of trying to figure things out or exploring the creativity side to get us through in the pivot. Like we can't just focus on okay, this doing this makes me feel better, so I'm going to do this, and then forget that oh yeah, by the way, I'm still working on my survival skills. So make sure that we
Exactly.
definitely have to prioritize what matters most first, and then
Mm-hmm.
kind of work our way into other aspects.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's something that, again, something I did in the latest pivot was paying off credit card debt that I had.
Mhm.
It was my number one priority because I saw it as the biggest cause and perpetrator and point of
Yeah,
contention for me, and I wanted to make sure that I took care of it because I had
yeah.
to pivot and like I paid off a bunch of credit card debt, and
Mhm.
then I had to pivot, and then it was back. So
Yeah.
when I got a new job, I was like, "This is what's going to happen. This is what I need to do first. I need to pay this
Yeah.
off, and then I'm going to stash." And so that's all that's been happening. It's been, well, I'm done with credit cards, so thank God. But I paid off my credit cards, and now I've just been stashing, stashing, stashing. So I just want to make sure I'm in a place where if I have to pivot again, then I'm very very comfortable rather than just kind of comfortable for this. I'm good for a month, but that's it.
Right.
I want to be,
Right.
yeah. So I think that was
Yeah.
definitely a place where I was focused on and prioritizing, like paying off my bills and making sure that they're not gonna come back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in doing that, you pretty much like, embrace your new normal,
Mm-hmm.
like this is what I got going on now. So in order to cope with this, I'm gonna have to embrace it. Okay, so I'm embracing that this is where I am and I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna pay off these credit cards and get it back in in line to where I was, pre-pivot, and now I'm doing it again post pivot. Um so maybe the normal wasn't new, maybe just the normal, not necessarily a new normal. But in times where you do have, something new that's going on, you just have to be open to embracing that new normal.
Yeah,
I know for
I agree.
myself, I don't like change.
Uh-huh.
Change is really difficult for me.
Mm-hmm.
In all aspects of my life. I'm not even gonna pretend like career wise, I don't like change. If
Mm-hmm.
something in the job is changing, be it leadership or a new way that we do things, I've always been like the pushback, like, oh my God, what is this? Why now? I mean that has been me for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I've had to like learn that okay, you have to embrace this new, like you're making it harder for yourself by going
Mm-hmm.
against the grain than
Yeah.
it would be for going with the grain. I don't like meeting new people. Like my circle is very intentional. You are laughing. I am so serious.
I know you are. That's why I'm laughing.
I don't add a lot of people in, so
Hmm.
I feel like I'm cordial when I meet somebody. Of course, I'm cordial. I'm gonna be nice to
Yeah.
everybody. Initially, but then after that first meeting, kind of depends on like how we progress, But I
Yeah.
don't let people in often. So when I
Hmm.
let people into like the layers of me, when somebody loses that trust or I lose that trust from that person, then it's hard. It's really hard to like get back.
Hmm.
So that's why, again, one of the lessons I learned is that, if don't nobody else got me, I got me, because
Yeah.
people that I have let in have really like, broken the trust that I've had.
Yeah.
had to be more responsible with giving away the responsibility that is me. You know, my
Mm-hmm.
being my friend is a responsibility, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's a responsibility that people cannot handle. And I
Yeah.
have given that responsibility to the wrong people, you know, over my lifetime. So I have to be more responsible with the responsibility of Sharice. You know, I had to learn that the hard way on number of occasions. You know.
Mhm. Yeah, I definitely
Yeah.
agree. I think I I've I've heard you say that before, and I
Hmm.
have always thought differently of that sentiment. But I think
Hmm.
over the last like 6 months or so, like I believe that to be wholeheartedly true. Like
Hmm.
I've
Yeah.
definitely um, been in a similar situation where you've given yourself to somebody in a way that is not necessarily
Hmm.
reciprocated. And
Yeah.
so you're then left like, okay, well, hmm, okay, I see. Like
Yeah.
it's also my responsibility to give of myself, and
Right.
so I need to do it
Responsibly.
better. Yeah, I need to
Yeah.
be more responsible of like giving myself to
Hmm.
certain people, or to people in
Yeah.
general, I should say.
Yeah.
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 Mhm.
Um, another way to cope is definitely take a fresh look at the foundation. This
Mhm.
is where I am. I'm starting from the ground level. So take a fresh look at the foundation and explore the next version of what the new foundation could possibly look like.
Mhm.
Once you're building back up from the ground up, you know what I'm saying? Just take a fresh look. Okay, I know what it looked like before, but I have a brand new floor plan. And I've always wanted
Mhm.
that bay window in the kitchen, you know? So like, just take a fresh look at your actual foundation. You are starting from square one in some cases. Not all pivots are bad, but those
Mhm.
that do require some reshaping, rebuilding, reimagining, then
Mhm.
it's best to just look at it with a fresh look. Like, okay, this is a brand new start, and I can go through it in this way, or survive it in that way, or do it this way. You just have a brand new floor plan, basically, essentially.
Yeah.
To start over and make it what you need it to be.
Mhm. So 2 years ago, I guess the beginning of 2020, I moved to California because I was in the midst of a pivot. So I had a new
Yeah.
job, and then I had to pivot again when the pandemic hit, and then towards the
Hmm.
end of last year, I lost my job. So like the plan that I
Hmm.
had going into 2020, I, I felt was a solid plan. It gave me time to do all the things that I wanted to do and accomplish the goals that I needed to. And it had like, I don't know, there was a timeline of about 8 to 10 months, and I essentially didn't make it through it because I spread the
Hmm.
timeline. And so my new floor plan this time was, all right, I got 4 months to do all the things that I want to do financially, and I'm going to do it in those 4 months no matter what. Like I was going to make all the sacrifices that I had to make those things happen. So I think
Hmm.
it's very true to like no matter what your plan was before, you can't allow your feelings or your connection to that plan affect how
Hmm.
you now move forward because everything has changed. Um,
Yeah.
and I was in a situation where everything had changed, and so it was no
Hmm.
longer the plan of 2020 was not the plan of 2021, and
Right.
this plan is legit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I just think it's important to make sure that you embrace those things and try to embrace everything that is coming, because it's not the last time you've had to pivot. It won't be the last time I'll have to pivot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think pivoting is a part of life. I think sometimes we pivot on our own accord
Mm.
on our own terms, and the
Yeah.
other times we're forced to pivot.
Mm.
So in either situation, whether it is man-made or self-made, you just have to prepare and embrace. Be open to the ideal of, okay, this is what it's looking like now, and I got to get this
Yeah.
thing together.
Mhm. Yeah, and I read something. It was saying like pivoting is not the end of everything. It's just the end of
Mm.
something and the beginning of something new. You know, so
Yeah,
like if
yeah,
you have to pivot doesn't mean everything that you have known up to that point is ended. Um,
yeah.
but you have to change the way you embrace your present and your future now. And I
Yeah.
think that's super important to remember that whether you're pivoting in or out of a relationship or a career or a living situation or a life situation or anything as an entrepreneur or business, like that pivot is not the end of you or your business or a relationship, or it could be the end of a relationship, but it's not the end of it's not the end of everything. It's just the end of a
Right.
singularity that was in your past and will not be your present, and you will embrace a new future, and that is okay. Um,
Yeah.
that is okay. Change is the only constant, so why not embrace it with open arms?
I mean, I hear you. As a person who does not like change, I'm listening. I'm trying to get better. Like, but I definitely like me. I struggle. I really struggle with change. I don't know why. Well, I probably know why because again, trust issues. But um, I do. I really struggle with change, and I have watched. How resilient you have been. And I tell you all the time, I was like, listen, like your drive, your passion, like your commitment to getting it, just not staying quote unquote stuck or like being like, oh, woe is me. You've always been like, okay, this is what's happening. So you're always in go mode, like this is what
Yeah.
happened. So boom, it's time to do X, Y, and Z. I need to make this move, that move, this move, and I always tell you like your drive, your strength, your hunger, is just admirable. And I'm gonna get better with change. um,
I appreciate
but
that.
yeah, it's definitely one of those things that that when it's unexpected, you can easily find yourself stuck. And I applaud you for never allowing yourself to just be stuck.
I appreciate that. I think I'm very fortunate. Like I grew up in a military household, and so moving was something that I had to do regularly. It's something change. I learned change at a very young age, and kind of not kind of. I had to accept it. And so I think
Yeah.
with moving all the time and losing friends and gaining new friends, I just got to a place where these things are going to happen. Like it's
Hmm.
my norm. So in those moments of transition, I just I give myself a moment and I go. And I remember when I got laid off, and I gave myself a moment. I walked to the end of a block. I came back, like sat on the porch, did some breathing and some talking, and shed some tears. And then I proceeded to reach out to old bosses and old contacts, and I applied for like
Hmm.
5 or 6 jobs that day, and
Yeah.
called people who could potentially employ me and figure out like how where there are openings. Um,
Right.
I try to do all the things as soon as possible so I didn't get stuck in a space of, man, this always happens to me, or this always feels like this, or like blaming myself for something um, that I didn't see coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny that you say all those things because they say that there are 5 things that you need to survive the pivot, and you've just listed all of them for yourself. They say you need to be resilient.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have an open mind. You also have to have an entrepreneurial mindset. You have to have a
Mm-hmm.
spirit of adventure, and then the fuel or the drive, and you just like all of that. I knew that I had to move a lot. It's one of the things that I knew was coming, and
Yeah.
I was open to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then just overall, like again, like you hit all of the list, just in that moment, or throughout your life, shall I say?
Yeah.
You don't allow
Mm-hmm.
yourself to get stuck, and I think that's huge when it comes down to pivoting and the survival of said pivot.
Yeah. I definitely agree. I think I was reading a book. I'm not going to remember the name of it, but I'm going to look it up real quickly because it was the last book I have read, and I'm not going to edit this part out. It is
Okay.
called The Dream First, Detail Later. Um, it's
Okay.
by, who is it by? Ellen Bennett. Um,
Okay.
for all of you who have not stepped out on your dream, it is, I would say, it's a good
Mm-hmm.
book for someone who is looking to do something different and has not yet had the confidence or the belief in themselves to step out. And I think it's a good book to just give you a little kick in the butt. Um,
Yeah.
for people who are more entrepreneurial and have taken chances, I would not suggest the book, but it said something. Be honest. um, it it was a very it was written recently, and so at the beginning of the pandemic, the author makes aprons, and so at the beginning of the pandemic, uh, they were forced to close down their factory and everything. And then she had a contact with someone who worked at a hospital, and they were talking about how they need masks. And she just
Mm-hmm.
realized in that moment that she's like, I have fabric, I have people
Yeah.
who can sew, I have this whole space that I can use, and
Mm-hmm.
I can make masks. And
Yeah.
she had like, it was like a moment, an instantaneous moment where she came to that epiphany that she could pivot into this new space and help her
Mm-hmm.
company and her people survive. Because I think a lot of people had to just stop working and not get paid, and they didn't have the vacation, and they didn't have the resources. And so she was able to keep people working because she made that decision quickly and immediate. And I think
Yeah.
that is it's resilient. She remained, like, she kept an open mind. She had that entrepreneurial mindset and a spirit of adventure, because whenever there's something new, you
Mm-hmm.
just have to have that spirit of adventure, to
Yeah.
just jump, to go, to step out. And so I thought that was an awesome moment in that book, from my perspective. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
if if you're interested, check it out.
Yeah. What's the
Mhm.
name of the book again?
It is Dream First, Details Later by Ellen
Okay.
Bennett. Hmm.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's dope, the story, in the book. And I think that she did, what she needed to do in that moment. I feel like
Hmm.
it's, very important, like I said earlier, to focus on the facts and not your feelings. And I
Hmm.
think that, that was a great example, her being able to say, okay, I need to change my business. This is what I have. This is what I can do, and this is
Hmm.
where it can be. Versus saying, "Oh my God, I have to shut down." So
Yeah.
make sure that in the midst of your pivot, that you be sure to focus on the facts and not your actual feelings to help get you through and potentially survive.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think um, it's a beautiful thing when you're able to pivot and continue to thrive in a moment.
Yes.
Even if you have to go down a little bit or take a beat or
Mhm.
slow down, it's a beautiful
Mhm.
thing when you see companies pivot, when you see people pivot, and they continue to move forward. So, all of you who've had to because of the pandemic, I commend you and I applaud you.
Mhm.
And uh, be kind to yourself, because it takes a lot.
Yes.
It is not an
Yes.
easy thing, especially done out of necessity or survival. It's a
Mhm.
hard space mentally, emotionally, and physically. So be kind to yourself, and I commend you. I think we're going to call it right there. We
Yeah.
appreciate you for taking this time with us to talk about pivoting and taking the next step in life. Reese, you got anything you want to say?
Yep. Just remember, you are only responsible for today. All other days will take care of themselves. I've said it plenty of times in season one. I'll say it plenty more times throughout this podcast. But while you're here, make sure that you hit that notification bell. Don't forget to like this video, share, and comment. Make sure that you subscribe as well. We appreciate you for tuning in to this episode of Discourse and Chill. And yeah, that's all I got.
All right, y'all. We appreciate you checking us out. And also, you can check out season one of this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Castbox, and Overcast. So check those out, subscribe, like a video, share, all those good things. We appreciate y'all, and we'll check y'all out next time.
Bye, guys.